So in this video we're going to be looking at a lot of different topics within the step sequencer and how we can create a drum loop to what it is that we're wanting to achieve. So I've loaded up a new patch or a new bank within the Digitakt, and this is the default bank that we get, so these are the sounds that we get. So this is what we're going to be working with today, and we're just going to create a simple beat going through each of the features of the actual step sequencer and how we can create different things within the step sequencer itself. So starting at the basic, what we want to do is select a track for the sound that we want to choose. So for example, if we want the kick drum, we can press the kick drum, or we can hold track and then all these buttons lights up, and we can press on a pattern or a number or a track, and then that takes us to the actual track itself without playing the sample. So if you're using this in a live performance and you wanted to alter the cutoff frequency of, let's say, your bass, then you could press track, hold that, say this is your bass sound. You could then go to that on your filter page, and then you can start messing around with your filter on that, and then you can go back to your kick, and that's without playing the sound itself. The next thing we want to look at is how we actually enter the step sequencer mode. So all we've got to press is the record button, and now this takes us into the track step sequencer. So with this we have these 4 buttons here, or these 4 LEDs here, which denotes the pages. So each page holds 16 steps. So this first page holds 16 steps. If I pressed on this button, it doesn't do it because I need to press function and page. This takes us into that other menu where we can adjust the length of the pages of these steps. So on this first page, for example, I could then reduce the length of this first page by doing that. And what this does is it can create polyrhythms. So this pattern could be polyrhythmic. Alternatively, we could just press the button itself, and then this takes us to the number. Or if we want to extend the pattern itself, we can just press this page, and then the page goes up. I will just go back to the start, and if we're on this page and we have, let's say, this pattern sequence, and then we go back into the page menu and I press that button again, what that will do is it will copy the first page onto the second page. So if we can see that now, it's been copied over to the second page. Because we're pressing this page button here, it's swapping, it's going from the first 16 banks to the next, it's going from 17 to 32. And then back to 16. So when we start playing it, you'll see this light flashing, and then when it gets to the end, the second bar will flash. So if I just press play, you see the second one lighting up. I'm just going to turn the LED density up because I don't think you can see that as much. So I'm just going to go into my settings, go to my system, and then the LED intensity, I'm just going to turn that up to max. Or I'll turn it to medium. That looks alright. So with that being said, just do that again. And you can see the next one now being lit up. The main page that we're on is this first page because this is the one that has been lit up, and then this one has been lit up dimly. So this shows that what page you're on when it flashes, but it shows what page you're actually on by the lit LED. So we can change that over to what page we're on, and you'll see it flashes when it shows us what page we're on. If I wanted to clear the sequences, I could either push on the step sequencer again to remove them, or if I wanted to clear the whole pattern, I can just press function. Whilst I'm in the step sequencer itself, I can just press function and then clear, and what that does is it clears the whole track. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to play some tracks. So 1, 6 and 4, this is just going to be a simple sort of house beat. There's 2 ways that we can record this in. We could either go into the step sequencer itself, so for example this is a clap. If I go into this step sequencer, I'm just going to put this down to number 1 as well. So I'm just going through one page, it's just easier to show you. So we're on the clap sample. I could then say, right, I want the clap on 5 and 13, and then I want to go to my kick, and then I want that to be a 4 on the floor, so 1, 5, 9 and 13, and then this hat, I want them in between, so I'll go 3, 7, 11 and 15, and then now we should just get that simple house pattern. Just going to speed it up a bit, so I'm going to press the tap tempo page and then just turn it up to let's say 1, 2, 4. And then that's just a simple house pattern beat. If we're wanting to record it in manually, then what I will do first is clear the whole sequence by not being in the actual track itself, but being in the whole sequence. What I did there is just press function and clear, and now the whole sequence is cleared. So this, what I recorded in before, will be cleared, and the clap, that's cleared, and the kick, that's cleared. So for example, this is the kick track. If I just put in them notes, the clap, if I go into the sequencer, put in some notes, come out of that, the hat, select the hat, go into the sequencer, put in some hat notes, this is what we've got. If I didn't like any of that, which I don't, I come out to that, so we can clear the step sequencer by binning this and then pressing function and then clear. So now we can see on the screen that the sequence is cleared. And then if we press play, that's done by that. So I'm just gonna go back to my hat. I don't mind that rhythm. So I'm just gonna do that. That sounds all right. And then on this one, this is gonna be get a bit of energy into it. So in this next part, what I want to show you is how to turn on the metronome and how to access the metronome. So if we press function and then the pattern button, what this does is it turns on the metronome, and the metronome sounds like this. We can edit the metronome itself by pressing function and then holding the pattern button down. This will then take us to the metronome page where we can alter the activate the metronome on or off, and we can adjust the time signature. So if we wanted to work in a different time signature, we could do. The pre-roll bars, this is if we're recording in live, and the overall volume of the metronome. So if I just play about a few of these just to show you. So that's all the metronome does on the Digitakt, but it's a good pointer to give you the tempo of what you want to do when you're recording in live, which is what we're going to look at next. Next, we're going to look at swing and how we can access swing. So swing is simply done by pressing the tempo button. This is where we can alter the tempo and then the swing amount. So if I just press on this, it's very rigid, but if I add some swing, we can add swing to our sequence. In this next part, I want to show you how you can record your steps in manually into the step sequencer. So we have this at the moment. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to clear that pattern so the sequence is cleared. This erases everything in that sequence. I'm just going to arm all the tracks again by pressing function and then clicking on the track that isn't green. So what we have is our kick, as hat and as clap. To record it in manually, all we have to do is click on the record button and the play button at the same time. Now you'll notice at the top it says live recording and then it says quantize. What that will do is it will quantize it to the grid, where if we want to have it unquantized as we're playing it in, all we do is press on that again and then it will be unquantized. This is good if you're wanting more of a human feel to your production or to the sequence that you're putting it into. What I'm going to do is just go into the metronome menu itself, and as you'll notice on the G encoder it says pre-roll bars. Now I've set this to 1, but you can set this to however many pre-roll bars you want. You can set it up to 16 or off. So off, it'll just start playing straight away. 1, it's going to give you a bar and then it's going to start playing. So if I press the record button and play, what that's going to do is it's going to give me a bar before it starts to record, or it's going to start playing through the sequence. So all I'm going to do is just do a simple to the tempo. So I'll start this now. And as you can hear, that is totally way out of sync to what the metronome is. So there's a few things that we can do. If I go back into the kick, let's say, and I go into this, I look at this and I can go, that's just way out of sync. I want them to be here. We can either move all this across by pressing the function button and the left and right arrows. This shifts the whole sequence across. We'll notice that this one isn't in time with this, but we'll just hear how it sounds. So I'm gonna, because it's out of sync, I'm gonna take that off and just gonna press that onto number 13. Still out of sync, so what I'm gonna do next is go to my hat. I'm gonna click on this, and as you can see, these are in the right space. They should be on 3, 7, 11, and 15, but I want to retain that feel of it. So what I'm going to do again is just press function and then the right button. This should just shift them to where they should be, and then from there we're going to go to his clap. Going to go into that, and as you can see, this should be on the 5 and the 13. So I'm just going to take this off and then put it on the 13. This will be dead on the bar. So as you can see by that, it's not very on the grid, it's not very quantized. So we'll look at quantization next. To access quantization, what we do is we just press on the function and then the trigger page, and you'll see underneath it says quantize. This brings us to the quantize page. Now we have 2 settings for this. We are on track 4, so it's telling us that track 4, we could either tighten this up, quantize, just on that particular track, or we can do it globally, which is on F. So globally affects all the tracks, whereas if we are on a track like this, you'll see that the track now is being affected individually on this quantize. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put it globally to what I feel it's alright. So about 87, that gives it that human feel. It's tightening it up just a tiny bit, but it makes it so much better than what it was. That's just way too loose. That's way too tight. So somewhere in between, that just sounds about right. And that's how we can quantize individual tracks up or quantize the whole global tracks. In this part we'll look at chromatic mode. Now chromatic mode, what it does, it allows you to play the sample over a scale or over the keyboard scale. So to enter the chromatic mode, what we first have to do is select a sample that would allow us to use the chromatic mode. So you could use any sample. You could use a kick drum if you wanted to use that on the scale of the keyboard, but in this example what I've done is I've just selected a pad, and now what I want to do is I just want to take that pad and I want to play it over the keyboard, so the pitches of whatever that root note is going to be selected out on every single key of the keyboard. So to enter the chromatic mode, what we do is we press function and then track. This takes us into the chromatic mode, and you'll see here we have these buttons lit up. So what these buttons denote is these bottom buttons are the white keys and these top buttons are the black keys, as you can see on the screen at top. So if I press this button, you can see that's C, C sharp, D, D sharp, so forth and so forth. The next part we can do is select a scale. So on this scale, if we have a project where we're working in C major, for example, we can then select that and just turn this to the major scale. We're working, the root note is C, and then as you can see, all these bottom notes now are lit up. If it was C major, for example, some of the black keys would be lit up, and that is the scale to what you're working in. Now you can use this to pull all these back into a single row, and what that does is, and what we can do there basically is we can use keyboard fold. Now keyboard fold, all it does is just takes all them notes that are in that scale and puts it into a note for you. So this is the root note, and then these in between keys are the notes that are within that scale. So that's C minor. You can do this with any scale, C major, and so forth and so forth. This is a monophonic device, so you can only play one note at a time, but you can resample things to make chords, which is what I've done in this particular instance, where I've taken a chord from the Diva, and this has been brought into this, which is a chord, and then I can now play this on any note that I wish to choose. So to come out of that, what I'm going to do is just come out of that again, and as you can see, this is the sample itself. So it's quite a lengthy sample. So if I wanted to loop this sample, I could do that within the actual settings themselves. I'll just click on this, let's say forward loop, and then I could set my loop length. So let's do it further up here actually, so you can hear what's going on. So if I just click on this, and then it just loops in that part. So once you get that setting right, you can have this on for infinite amount of time. But I'm just going to turn everything back to what it was. And that's that. So if we go to a track mode and we want to record this in, so if I just go and click on that, so the other thing that I haven't mentioned there is by going down an octave and up an octave, we just press on these two buttons here, the up and down arrows. This takes us down 4 octaves, and then it goes from C1 to C6. I am just going to alter this decay time. So that's sounding all right. So if I start to play this and then I want to record it in, if I start playing this and then press on the record button and the play button at the same time, what that's going to do is it's going to allow me to record in whatever it is that I want to record in. So let's say, for example, if I just do that, let's just try that. So press record and then play. So I messed up there when I clicked off of the step sequence itself. So what I could do with that is I could press on an actual button, find out what the actual note value is, or I could come back up here, and because I know what scale I'm in, I could look at what note it was. So it's G5. So if I go back into my sequencer, and I wanted it to be, let's say there, I could then click on that to go to G5, and then I could press on this trigger here, press copy, and then I could go into number 13 and press paste. And then what we could do then is copy the length of these two. So if I click on these two notes here, I can set them to the same length as what this is. If I just click off that and put that on again, and then just do the exact same with that, so I know it's hitting on the 1. And then we've got a nice tight sequence that we can use. Now, let's say I wanted to automate this throughout the sequence. What I would do is just press on the record button and play, and then I would alter a parameter that I would like to automate. And what you'll notice now is that we have these yellow icons flashing. So when they are yellow, what it means is that an automation of a parameter has happened. And when they're flashing at you, it means there's something happening. So if I hold down on this button, let's say, you can see that the value of the frequency is 79.64. On this value, it's 87. So there's movement within the filter. If I click on this, it's 64.2. But you'll notice that these are yellow because these are what are triggering the sample. So this is why they're staying red. If I had one sample starting here and it were a loop, let's say a bass loop, and I altered the frequency, what you would get is this note would be red, and then if you had this over 64 bars, let's say, every note that you altered would be yellow and it would be flashing. And then you could see what value it is that you've done. So even on this itself, you could click on number 12 and let's say I wanted a bit of resonance there. So that would happen on that step only. Whereas this one is 0. That one I've taken up to 59.11. So that's just a quick look at automation and what you can do and utilize automation within the step sequencer itself. The next thing I want to look at is trigger conditions. Now, trigger conditions are really powerful for creating variety within your step sequence. So if I set up, let's just do that. And then what I'm going to do is you will see that what I've got set up there, this is what I'm playing. That's what I'm playing. The probability, this is where it happens. So the probability is the percentage of what percentage it is it's going to be played. So if I bring that down to 0, you'll hear nothing being played. If I put it up to 100, everything will be played. But if I put it somewhere, let's say 50%, this 50% each step of this is going to play or not. So that can add a bit of randomization into your sequence. You can make some random fills doing this. If you've got a snare in your production, let's say, you could bring it into this and you could just go. You can create some random snares. You could do anything that you want with it. But the beauty of this is if I keep it on 100, and let's say I've got this. So because this is happening over 16 steps, this is what we would say as what I would say as 1 bar. So let me just explain. So if I click on number 10, for example, you will see that this condition has been altered. So if I set this, you've got different ones here, which we won't look into, but I could basically change this step to say, right, you've got 50% chance of playing. All the rest are going to play, but that one there has got 50% chance of playing. If I go onto this one here, you've got 25% of chance playing. So on this, we have different settings. We have the percentage, we have fill, not fill, pre, not pre. We have NEI, not NEI, first, not first, and then we have these numbers. So what these numbers mean is on the first cycle of this pattern, it will play, but on the second, it won't play. So if I set this to 2-2, what you will see is it will run through once, not play, and then the second time through, it'll play. Which is, you can more or less extend your bars out to a massive amount, so we can have up to 8/8. So on 8/8 it would have to play through 7 times, and then on the 8th time it would play. I'm not going to play that because it'll take ages, but that is basically what that does. These are obviously within the manual, so the fill and the not fill, for example, that is if we set this to not fill, what that will do is play it until I press the button, and then vice versa the other way around. If I press fill, it won't play it until I press the fill button. So with that, we could basically create some fills of our own. We could do all sorts with it. So that is what trigger conditions are. So each step can have its own trigger condition. If we're playing in a live environment, we might want to mute some of these tracks. So the first way that we can do it, which is the long way around, is press function and then click on and off on a track. The alternative way, it would be to press function and then enter the mute mode. So we press function and then the bank page. This brings up all of the tracks that aren't muted. So if we can click on the kick, for example, it's there in front of us face, where it's easy for us just to take stuff out, muddle about, and then bring them all back in at the same time. We don't have to press function and then go like that. We can just basically just be in the mute mode and then press that. So for example, I could click on track 8, I could then sort this and bring it back in. So to shift the whole sequence along a step, all we do is press function and then press the left and right arrows, and what that does is it just moves the full sequence left or right. So as you're playing it, you can move it left, and as soon as it sounds good, just leave it there. So that sounds alright. So that's just another quick and easy way to, if you had a rhythm going, you could basically compare that rhythm to another part of the rhythm within your sequence, and you could quickly just nudge the sequence left or right to your choosing. So in this, I want this to be a polyrhythm. So to create a polyrhythm, we press function and then go onto the page, and then we can either say we want this to be in the pattern mode or have it per track. So right now it's in the pattern mode because we can see at the top it's in pattern. So what this will do is it'll play all the patterns within this bank at that value, but we're wanting it per track. So if we click function and yes, it's now in per track mode. So we can see on the left hand side we have track 3, which is what we're on. So if I just come out of this, we're on track 3. If I go into the page mode, I can then tell this sequence to play in a certain amount of steps, and it will repeat that sequence until the end of the full sequence. So if I just take this down to 9, let's say, come out of that, and then I will go into my sequencer, and then I want to be on 2, 5 and 8. Let's see how that sounds. So what you'll notice there is it runs through, and then the sequence, it'll start again until how many more steps here. So it'll go, so it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 7 more steps. So it'll run through once, and then it'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then when it gets to 7, which is the end of the full sequence, it'll restart again. So if you notice, it just stops at 7 and then it goes back to 1. And then that's how you can get polyrhythms within your track itself. You can also change this in lifetime. So if we like that, let's not forget just to save that to as temporary area, And then if we go into that again, we can go into the page itself, the actual pattern page, and then we can reduce the length by 5, let's say. It doesn't let your mind lock on to the patterns that you've placed, and it doesn't bring everything fully to the step sequencer. You can rearrange the step sequencer per track on a per track basis, so you can reduce them down to whatever you want. So the sequence is coming along nicely, but what I want to do is I want to just sort of retweak the sounds that are within our sequence. So if I go to the beat, for example, which is this, the tail's quite long, as we can see. I want to sharpen that up. So what I'm going to do is go into the amp page, and then I'm going to reduce the decay time down, and then also the hold time. That sounds quite nice. I also want to change this hat over, this open hat. I'm going to change that to suit, so I'm just going to press it a couple of times whilst I turn the hold time and decay time down. Like that one. And then I think I want to pan that a bit to the right as well, get a bit of stereo field in the mix. And then I'm going to pan that to the left. And then I'm going to do the same with this one. So let's see what that does. And then same with the clap as well. I think I want that a bit tighter. And then even this. So that's sounding a lot better. So we can jump between each of the sounds by pressing track, or we can press them on them themselves, tighten up each sound, and then we can now add effects maybe to this. So say we're wanting a bit of reverb. So for this mix, what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the reverb to all the tracks. So we've got our drums, they're nice and tight, we've got a bit of a sequence going on, and I just want to add reverb to this now. I'm going to add reverb to the full sequence. So how we do this is we press and hold the track button down, and then we turn whatever parameter we want. In our case it's going to be reverb, and then that will apply the same amount of reverb sends to all the tracks. So I'm just going to see what it sounds like, so I'm just going to press play. So that's nice. The kick is a bit too strong, so what I can do then is with the kick track selected, I can just bring the reverb back a bit. And then furthermore, to design the reverb, we can go into the reverb page by pressing function and then pressing on the amp page, which is now the reverb page. We can set a pre-delay, high pass filter. We can set the gain of the shelving frequency and set the frequency at the point. It's like a dampener sort of thing. And then we can set the length of the decay here. That sounds alright. If we want to go back into that and change these parameters, we can do by pressing track and then turning the key down, that will all be in proportion to each other, so whatever values they are, they will just turn down within proportion to each other. So if this is on 30 and this is on 40 and we turn it down by 10, this will be on 20 and then this will be on 30, if that makes sense. We can bring in other samples within the sequence itself. Now this brings us into parameter locks, and this is where we're going to go with this bit. So if we go into the sequencer itself, we can see that this is the sequence we have got. What I'm going to do first is I'm just going to mute each track apart from this one. So if I press function, you'll see that it all lights up green. So I'm just going to mute every track apart from track number 6. So now only track 6 will be playing. You can see the green lights are flashing, but that's just showing us that this track has been muted. So if we go into the sequence of that, we can then start to tweak each step within this sequence. So for example, if on this step 3 I wanted a bit more bit reduction, I could turn that up, and I'm just over exaggerating here so you can hear. And then on step 13 I wanted a bit more bit reduction. Let's just see how that sounds. We can do things like that within the step sequencer, and that is on every step that you have up to 64 steps. So you can do things like that. To cancel that, you'll notice as well that when you do make a change to a step, it'll start blinking red. This just shows you that there's something going on within that step. So to cancel that step, all we do is press on it, and then whatever parameter comes up that shows us there's a change, that is what has been changed. So we can cancel that by just clicking down on the encoder, and then it'll go back to its normal state, or its original state it was in. So we can click that again and then come out of that like that. We can also do anything with these. So if you can see here, we've got a trigger page, there's source page, there's filter page, there's amp page, and then there's LFO page. We can change every parameter on every step. So we can take this sound and make it into something completely different. So let's say we had taken loads of samples from a synthesizer, let's say the Moog synthesizer. So I recorded in every sample one by one, so every note was being played, it got recorded in. I could then play a melody by hitting this and then going to maybe C note, D sample, E sample, whatever. It's a long way around of doing it, but that's how powerful this is, because you can swap and change samples. You don't necessarily have to be from the same sort of synthesizer. You can do this with any sounds. So for example, on this first one, let's do number 3. So on that sequence now, it's playing sample number 3. So on that number 3, we can say, I don't really like how long it is. I can take that reverb up, and then I can add delay to it, and then this is what we get. And you can do anything with it. To reset all that, all we do is push down this like that, and then even push down on that, and then that takes it back to its original value. So that's a really powerful tool to create sequences that have something happening on every single sort of element. You could have let's say a chord, a stab in, and you could have that in there, and you could basically pitch that up by, I don't know, that, pitch it down there, pitch it all the way up there. And with that, you can create totally different soundscapes, totally different elements. You could go into your reverb and say, right, I want that on max. And then that one, I want that on max. And I want that to right. Maybe not all the way to right, but. And it's just a really powerful way of creating variety, and ear candy basically in your tracks. This brings us on to the next sort of thing that we can do within the sequence, and that is micro timing. So micro timing means you can basically shift whatever note value you've placed or sequence that you've placed and just nudge it ever so slightly off grid. Basically like the nudge thing in the nudge parameter in Ableton. So you can nudge it left or right. So to do that, all we do is hold down what we want to be placed left or right. We then push on these two buttons here. So it's called U-time. U-time minus, which goes shifting the sequence a bit to the left, just a step to the left. Or we can go all the way to the right. And then that just gives another different feel to the track. What's good about this as well is, let's say on this example here, we can layer things up, like we can squash these two together so it's sort of playing like a flam sort of thing. So if I bring that all the way to the left, what I'm doing is bringing this step closer in to this, and then what I'm going to do with this one is bring it closer out to this step. So what we should get here is a flam, but what we can do with this is we could say, right, this step here, I want this to be panned left 40, and this one here, I want that to be panned right. So within this sound now, we can have sort of like a design sound. Let's just see how it sounds. So we can do things like that with it. We can also add more reverb to it, more delay. So we can do things like that as well. So really start to layer up sounds upon layer up sounds. So like in the previous video where we used a couple of tracks to layer a sound and resample that, we can do the exact same thing here, but by having that sort of that flam thing that's known in rolling gear. And then that brings us on to the Retrig functionality. So what Retrig is it basically re-triggers the same note over and over and over until the next note has been played. To get into that page, what we do is we press on the pattern itself, and then we push on the up button. It is then controlled, we get a new menu, and this is then controlled by these four parameters here. So these two here enable the Retrig mode. This sets the rate of the retrig. So this goes from 1 to 1 all the way up to 180. So I'm just going to leave it at 16ths. And then these two buttons here, so the bottom button is your velocity. So we've got plus 127 all the way down to minus 128. So this is the velocity curve. So if I turn the velocity to minus 128, what that does is it sets the velocity curve fade out and fade in of the retrigger. So minus 128 corresponds to a complete fade out during the set length. Minus 64 halves the velocity during the set length. 0 equals a flat velocity curve with no fade. Plus 64 fades into half velocity during the set length, and 127 fades in completely to full velocity during its set length. So these are the settings that I've set up just for an example, and what we'll do is switch between the minus 128 and 127 so that you can hear what is going on. So in this last step, the E rate is on 132, the length is on 14, and then the velocity is 127. So this should fade up to its full velocity value over a quarter note at a rate of 132. So if I just play that, now if I did that the opposite way, I could do it on 128 and it should fade out, it should fade down basically. You can also change the rate by clicking on the button itself and then changing the up and down value. So if I just had this playing, so that way we can add some fills, we can add some nice triplet sort of feels going on in there. So that's how we do the Retrig functionality. So we can also add swing to our sequence as well. So how we do that is we click on the tempo, and then we can see this button here is split up, well, this page is split up into two different sections. We have this BPM, which is controlled by the level data encoder, and the swing is done by the E encoder. You can see below the percentage it has the letter E, which means that it's on this encoder. So if I just start playing it, the swing value goes from 50% all the way up to 80%. So we can just have a happy medium with that. And then we could add a bit of swing into his pattern. It's a good idea to save your project as you go along, so you can do that and save it into a temporary location. You can do that by pressing function and yes, and then you can reload the pattern by pressing no. So if, for example, we did do that and then we saved it into a location, so for example if I just did this again, that, and then that, so we had that, and once you save that, that is then stored within the Digitakt to a temporary location where we can reload that at that point. So this is like you sort of like your save for your pattern sort of thing. So if, for example, I mistakenly did that and went, oh, I can't get that back, but I can, because I just press function and then no, and then that reloads it from the last point that you saved. So that is how you save it to a temporary location, and you can reload it from that temporary location from the last point you saved it. So the last bit of this video, I wanted to show you shortcuts. So within our project, so our project is basically, let's say this is a folder. So within this project, what we have is we have 8 banks available in the project. So right now I'm on bank 10, and within each of these banks you can have 16 patterns. So I'm in bank 10, and then this is the first pattern that I'm on. So this is where we've been throughout this video. So this is going to bring us into his next video, which is song mode. So if we wanted to make a track within this bank and this pattern, then what we will want to do is to try and copy the patterns from pattern 1 to pattern 2, etc., or copy maybe banks onto another bank if you've got a big project going. But what I tried to do within here is I tried to keep my patterns within 8 pattern banks, so as a maximum, because then you can fit 2 songs per bank. So then you could have a maximum of 16 songs per project. That's if you keep it within the 8. So you can split each pattern into a sort of different part of the track. So for example, I usually start with the intro, we do a bridge, maybe a chorus, pre-chorus, and then whatever you fancy, maybe some random effects sort of fills, this, that and other that you can do. And then we can incorporate that all within the song mode and program it up to whatever pattern we want to do. So let's say this pattern 1, for example, we have this playing. So I want to copy pattern 1 to pattern 2, because I don't want to be doing basically what's in pattern 1, going to pattern 2 and redoing it all again, because nothing's in pattern 2 at the moment, so there's nothing there. So to copy a pattern over, what we do is we go into the pattern mode, we hold the pattern that we want to be copied, and then we press copy. You'll see on the screen it says copy pattern. So now it's been copied. So we press the pattern again, we go onto a new pattern, which is going to be number 2, hold pattern 2 down, and then we press paste, which is the stop button. And then that pattern that we've copied is now pasted in the number 2 slot. So number 2 will now play what is in number 1. And we can see what pattern we're in over in the top left hand corner, which we're on bank B pattern 2, so B02. If we were on B7, we would do it, just shows up there. So B1, which is going to be his intro, what I could do then is go into this sequence, say this here, I didn't want that in all. What I'll do is I'll just delete that, and then let's say I will delete the open hat. So right now I'm in pattern 1, and then in order to get to pattern 2, we can then do that by pressing on the pattern button and then jumping over to it. So what will happen when it plays is it'll play through the full pattern and then it'll switch over to a new pattern. So this is how song mode works. You're basically programming up what patterns you want in what sequence. So if we create pattern 1, for example, as his intro, pattern 2 as our bridge, pattern 3 as a chorus, etc. It could be in any way you want to what you feel. We could then program that in song mode, which we'll do in the next video, and then we can make a song that way. So that's how you copy patterns. Now I want to copy a track. So patterns, as we know, are the full pattern. Tracks are individual tracks that are within the pattern. So we've got 16 tracks within this pattern. I will say, in fact, we haven't got 16 tracks. We've got 8 tracks within this pattern and 8 MIDI tracks within this pattern. So if I wanted to copy a track, let's say this kick, and I wanted that kick to be placed on number 8, let's say, instead of number 1, what I would do is press the track button itself, press on the track itself, and then press copy. Now you can see on the screen it says copy track 1 sound, so that I know now is copied. So now what I've done is I have copied track 1 into track 8. So that is all the parameters, the sounds, but it isn't the sequence. So what we have is we have basically that same sound in track 8 now. So this brings us on to his next part, which is to copy the sequence. So to copy a sequence, what we want to do is go to the track that we want to copy the sequence from. So for example, this is the kick track. We go into the sequence itself, so by pressing the red button, so this is within the sequence. We then press and hold the function and copy button, and this copies the sequence. We come out of that, we want to go into the new sequence, which is where we have copied the track. So this is the same sound as this. So number 8 is where we want to paste this sequence. What we do then is go back into the sequence itself and then press function and paste. And then what that does is it copies the sequence from where we've taken it from and plonks it right in there. So if we mute that one track now, this should be playing. And that goes the same with if we had any automation on this. So for example, just show you this, if I just put a bit of bit reduction on there, so it's 77. I'll take it. Mute all them for now. now. So we can hear that step 13 is different to as other steps. So to prove that, it takes the parameter locks with it. So we go into copy mode again, we press function and copy to copy the sequence, come back out of that, we go to our track where we want it to be pasted, or the sequence to be pasted, we go back into the sequence and then we press function and then paste, and you can see there it's flashing up. If we press and hold that button down, we can see what parameters are, which they're exactly the same to what we did. And then if I just come out of that, mute number 1, and then that is how we paste, copy and paste a sequence. If we wanted to clear a sequence, let's say this one that we've just done, we could go into the sequence and then we can press function and clear, and what that does is it clears the whole track. Now to clear a pattern, what we would do is we would, to clear the whole parameters within the track, we would press on track number 8 itself, and then clear. And then what that does is it clears the whole sound within track 8. So there's nothing in that track, that is just a blank slate for us to do whatever we want with. To delete a pattern, exactly the same, we would just press pattern, hold 3 down and then clear, but it allows us to hold it, and then what that's done is it's cleared that number 3. So there's nothing on there now, it cleared the whole pattern. If we have our sequence set up here, and this is our intro for example, we can go into the menu page by hitting the settings button. If we go back to the main menu, this is what you should be on. If you're in a menu already, like I was, just come back out of that by pressing no, and then this is what you should be in. So we go into the settings page, and then we can go to the song or the pattern. So in this example, the pattern number 1, I want to rename that. So by clicking on that again, we can then rename this pattern. So number 1, so B01, I want that to be renamed as intro. Click on yes, and we'll see that when we're in pattern B1, it's renamed as intro. If I go to pattern 2, that's going to be still labelled up as untitled until we rename it. So again, if we just go into the settings page, which will be on there, go into the pattern and then go to rename, and then we'll rename this as, let's just say verse, and then we'll go 1, and then B02 now is verse 1, and then we can do that throughout as full patterns. So you don't necessarily have to call it intro and verse. If this was your song, for example, you could rename this. Let's say your song was called Sun, and then you could say this would be your verse 1. So your track is called Sun, you know this is the Sun, and then that's going to be verse 1. Along with the intro, if you had this, you could then rename that as Sun. Oops. And then INT. So then you know that it's your track, it's called Sun, and then that's the intro. So Sun intro, Sun verse, and then when you come to the song mode, which we're going to do next, we could rearrange all these to suit whatever sequence it is that you're wanting to do. So that's it for this video. We've covered quite a lot within the step sequencer itself, learning different things, what we can do with it, the retriggers, the sample per step change, micro timing, swing, real-time control, trigger conditions, parameter locks, individual track lengths, polyrhythms, along with a few shortcuts that are quite valuable to your workflow. So I hope to see you in the next one, which is the song mode. Hope that's been alright for you, and I will see you in the next one.